Today's problem is to find the next greater element. The sample 1 array is 4, 5 to 25. So, uh, as per the problem, whatever the next greater element that needs to be printed. So, for 4, the next greater element is 5. So, 5 needs to be printed. For 5, the very next greater element is 25. So, this is 25. For 2, it's 25. For 25, for last element, there are no other elements right to it. So, it's always minus 1. This is what the output is. So, the brute force approach is we can consider an element 4 have two for loops. The upper for loop will go through the each element and the lower for loop will compare that element with the other elements until it find the very next greater element. We will keep on searching it. So in this case we will find 5 in the inner for loop. So we will break the inner for loop and print next greater element for 4 is 5, and the upper for loop the I will be incremented, so this will be 5 and we will start comparing it from here. So it will compare with 2 and then 25. So 25 is greater, so 5 25 will be printed, and then next upper for loop will go to the 2 and it will keep on searching it for the next greater element 25, so it will be printed 25, and then it will go to, this is the last element. So for the last element we can have a check that if it is the if the element's position is n minus 1, directly we can straight away print 25 minus 1. We need not to go into the loops again. So as per the brute force approach, if we are comparing, in the worst case we are comparing the each element with the every other element, so the time complexity would be O of n square. O of n square. This is the brute force approach, and we can solve this problem using the stacks, so that we can solve this in a linear time and with the linear space. The approach is we'll have a stack, we'll push first element into the stack. This is the element uh, for which we are checking the next greater element. So we first initially will push this 4 and we start comparing the 4 with the next element. So we always keep track of an element called next and we'll keep it as 5. So we will come and then we will have an element for which we are, so that element will be the element which is in the stack. So we will pop this element, we save it in the element and then compare the next with the element. If at all the next is greater than the element, so the match will be the for element 4's next greater is 5. So this is the first output. Once we print that, we will push this 5 as an element. So this will be the next element. So this will be in the stack and the actual next will go to the next element. So this is here. Once we do this, the next step is we should have an element which needs to be compared. That element is 5. So this will be 5 now. We are popping it and keeping the 5 here. Again we will compare with the 2 and 5. Here in this case the next element is 2, the element is 5. Is the 2 is greater than 5? No, it is not greater. So we need to keep track of this element. So we'll again push it back to the stack, keep it there in the stack and go to the next step, and we need to have keep track of this next as well. So push that as well into the stack and go to the next element here. This will be the next 25 and the element would be 2 because we need to compare again. So we are keeping track of the elements in the stack so that we will not lose them. So now the element is 2. Now again compare, is 25 2, 25 greater than 2? Yes, 25 is greater than 2. So for 2 the next greater will be the 25 And then, are there any elements still left in the stack? Yes, still 5 is left. So again pop it and make the element 5 as an element. Again compare 25 with the 5. Is 25 greater than the 5? Yes. So if even 5's next greater element is 25. And now, are there any elements left in the stack? No, nothing. So what is the next step? We need to push the next into the stack. The for loop is done. So what we left with finally? We left with finally the stack which is having the last element as 25. So in this case we have only left with 25. For suppose if there is any other element which is also not having any greater elements, write to that. For suppose we have a 26 here. So even 26 doesn't have any right element, 25 also doesn't have any right elements. So we will be left with the 25 and 26 in the stack. So whatever we left with in the stack and the final, so all those elements are not having any right elements as greater element to them. So those will be printed like 25 minus 1, 26 minus 1. So we just need to pop an element from the stack and make the next greater element as minus 1. So the output will be, in this case, this 4, 5. If at all it's a 26, then 26 minus 1, 5, 25, 2, 25 and 25 minus 1. This would be the output. That's it. We'll code this out now. So let's have a function print next greater. We'll be given an array of integers. So now, and maybe the size is n. What is the initial thing that we need to do? We need to have a stack first thing and two more elements to keep track of actual element and the next element. So initially just have a stack s equal to new stack. That is one thing. And another is have two integers, those element, two integer variables, element and next. So these are the two integer variables. Now what we need to do? First we need to push the first element into the stack. This is the stack here, 4. So the very first thing is push the s dot push of array of 0. This is the very initial step. And then what we need to do? We need to start rotating from the next element. So we will have not rotating, traversing. For int I equal to 0, I less than n I plus plus, where I is the size of that. What we are doing now? We are keep tracking of the next. So we will just put it in the next. What is that? A of I. Once we keep it in the next, and then the very next thing is, are there any elements in the stack? If there are any elements in the stack, we should start comparing those elements with the next to print the next greater elements. So if the stack is not empty, that means s dot count is greater than 0, then what we need to do? We need to pop that element from the stack and compare it with the next. So what is that? So element would be s dot pop. Okay, now we got an element. What we need to do, once you pop it, you need to compare it. So in this case we have only one element in the stack. Maybe sometimes there will be multiple elements that we need to be compared. So it's always like, you know, it's gonna be a while loop. The comparison would be, as long as an element is less than the greater element, that is element is less than the next, you need to print next. Print here is nothing but a console.writeLine. So .writeLine next. Okay, you will print it. Once you print it, you will check if the stack is empty, you need to break, or otherwise pop the another element from the stack and compare it with. So the check would be if the stack dot count is equal to 0, that means if it is an empty, break from the while. If not, then again pop it. So element would be s dot pop. The same thing will be repeated, and again it will check with the next, and if it is the element is less than next, again it will print that. That is one case. And then what if element is greater than next? If the element is greater than next, we need to keep track of that element, so we'll push that element back into the stack. So s dot push of element. So we are keeping track of that element in the stack now. That is done. In the final, what we need to do, we need to have that next also in the stack, so that the next will become a next element, for which we need to find the next greater. So we need to push that next as well into the stack. Done. This will keep on happening until we left with some elements in this case, until we left with 25 in the stack. Once this for loop is done, we need to check, is there any element in the stack? Then we need to print all minus ones for those, all minus ones as next greater elements for all those elements. For that we need to have one more while loop, that is if we are concerned about the order of the elements in which we need to print the next greater elements, we can have a separate method where you can call the recursively and print the next greater elements. What I mean is, if then the check condition will be, if this count is greater than 0, let's have a function print remaining. What actually that print remaining does is, here I am writing, what that print remaining does is, it will call the same function recursively, so that the order will be maintained. So the exit case would be s dot count equal to 0, just return. If not, have the next as -1 and element as s dot pop. Once you pop it, again call the same function print remaining of s. So cursor will go till the bottom and then start printing those. So console dot write line next, so that it will print in an order. Okay, that's it.